As you can see from my lovely poster that was designed by someone here, I'm Mary Scott. I chair the School of Graphic Design. And like every creative practice, you have to put your work together at the end and put it into a form that's easily accessible by anyone you might interview with. And I always tell my students there's a common thread between every single one of your projects that you've done. My students do packaging and branding and advertising, but you do some form of building or space. But what's the common thread between every single project? Anybody take a guess? There is one common thread that runs through every project. That you did it. Okay, it's all yours. You know, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So the point is that it is a sum total of the work that you have done, whether you're going for a bachelor's degree or a master's degree. It encapsulates your work and it pulls it into one form of communication. You will also do a website along with, or at least our students do, and the architectural students who have taken my class have created their own website. They have their own stationery system that is cohesively designed and has the same integrity that the book does. You might say, oh, a book, that's so old school. Why not just have it be a PDF? Or why not just do a website? You need all the mediums. Architects, like designers, love books. How many of you love books? How many of you would kill for a book on architecture about whatever famous architect you want? I go to William Stout a lot because I love books as well, and it's very dangerous for me to go to William Stout because it's like being a child in a candy store. So every architect that I've ever known, I have worked for a very large architectural firm in Los Angeles, the one that built the Transamerica building. I was the graphic design director for all the projects of the firm, so I have I'm not an architect, but I know what plans and sections and elevations and axonometrics are and obliques, all those things that you do. So I have a sense of how they need to be presented. Obviously, you have mountains of work. When you go to make a portfolio, you go, how do I start? So if you're going to do this process, if you think of your projects as chapters in a book, they're all part of the same book, but they're different stories. They're different projects. One might be residential, one might be public space, one might be a corporate headquarters. You name it. You get all those exercises, plus experimental work at the beginning when you just start playing with shapes and learning how forms become a reality. So you have to put that together. So, you know, it's daunting to think about how to go about it. So basically what I ask the students to do is just the same thing the graphic design students have to do, is you start with one project. You decide, you pick any project, it doesn't matter, and you think about, if I were to show this in spreads, meaning pages in a book, that's what we call the two pages that face each other, and a title page, how would it look? How would I tell the story? What do I need to say about this project to give someone just enough information? Because we all know that people don't like to read these days, right? You want to be stimulated. You want to see something and go, ooh, that's beautiful. So you take one project and you say, well, if I were going to introduce a project, how am I going to do that? Am I going to say something about the project, or will I just name the project? And to give students something to latch on to, we said, don't forget to name the course that it was, because you're just emerging students. Name the course, name the instructor, the advisors, whoever the teammates were on the team. So that's a given on every single chapter. And then there's some explanation, a very brief paragraph about the project. So if I wanted to read it and know more about it, but architects are like everybody else, they just want to see the drawings. Nobody wants to see your transcript. Have you noticed that when you graduate, they just say, show me your work. So this is a method of showing one's work. I have the good fortune to have a student who's in my class right now, Nilu Golkarigar, I can never say her name right, but something like that. She has a shortened version of it called Golkar. So I'll just say that. So you'll see her website. What I don't have is her stationery system, but I can show you the stationery system and book and website of another student, Samantha Buckley, who graduated last spring. So I'm going to start by just walking you through a virtual portfolio. So you're going to see it as a virtual magazine or a virtual book. There is a website called Issuu, ISSUU, and you can take a set of PDFs and turn them into a book in seconds. So we do that at the beginning and seeing how the book, how the pages turn, how the pacing goes. You know, you want to show something very full and then some details. So you want to keep people interested. You want to engage whoever is interviewing you, because they're looking at their watch. They've got a meeting coming up. They've got a deadline, just like the people who can't come down here because they're on deadline. So when you present your work professionally and crisply, you get someone's attention. They pay attention because they go, holy shit, I don't know, I couldn't do this. You know, a lot of these people have been out of school for a long time, so when you walk in with your things all buttoned up, that's a great thing. It takes the pressure off of them saying, oh, you know, can this person, you know, put together a presentation? So we're going to look at Nilu's book. I encourage students to name their books. The one student who fought me on that was Archer Feruzzi. He says, architects don't name things. So Nilu disagreed with that, and so did Samantha. So they both named their books. I don't have Archer's book here, but he did a beautiful portfolio also. So this book is, I will show you, where did I put it? Here. This book, Liz, this is her first draft. It got made incorrectly by Blurb, so this white border shouldn't be here. But this is a company that takes your files and sends you back a book. How about that? You don't have to go find a printer. You don't have to go find a binder. The company's called Blurb, B-L-U-R-B. And you send them all your corrected, perfected files with everything loaded correctly, and you get back a pretty fancy book. I'll let you all see this afterwards. So we'll walk through Nilo's book. So pretend you're Nilo and you come to my class and you've got what, 8 projects? How many projects do you each have normally when you finish? 7, 8, 9? It depends. Okay. It doesn't matter. But just try to put yourself in Nilo's place. So know nothing about graphic design, which is my course is kind of a crash course in graphic design for architects, because you haven't been taught about typesetting. You don't know how to track type. You don't know how to let it. Those are all terms you have to learn. You pick them up like that, and once you do it, you're done. The nice thing about designing a book as a system, just like you would in architecture, you develop systems. Unless the field has changed since I worked in it, everything evolves around a system, a way of doing things. And that's what the portfolio is. So you will see repetitions on chapter openings. They all look the same, but they're different projects. Okay? So here we go. All right, so that's as big as I can make it, I guess. Can we lower these lights at all, or that would help? Looks much better on the screen. Thank you. That's great. All right, so these are 2 black sheets. Those are called end sheets because every book has end sheets. In reality, they're gray. That's what holds the book into the binding, okay? So that's what you're looking at. You could extract those if you wanted when you put your book on issue. So after your book is designed, you create a website using all of the systems you've used in the book. You put your book on issue, you embed that into your website, so someone could actually look at your portfolio on your website as well as look at individual projects. So every book in the whole wide world has a title page, so there is her title page. Actually, in reality, that page is gray opposite because it's opposite the end sheet. This is the only page in a book that is a single page. The rest are all spreads, like those are spreads. That's the term used for that. So, table of contents, tell people what they're going to look at. And this is a chapter opener. The name of this project is Runway. It is her thesis. Up here, I didn't bring my pointer, but the type up there, and the small type that's just above Runway Thesis, is the teacher's name, the class, the, blah, 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 all the pertinent information. And then the small type that you see at the very top of the page is called marginalia. And that is just like when you're reading the newspaper, it says the Chronicle, tells you the section, and it tells you what article you're reading. So that anybody looking at your book on every spread knows it's the Runway project, that you're the designer, and you're looking at such and such. So she decided to start her chapter openers with her doing something. She was inspired by what one of the graphic design portfolios had done a while back, where she was involved in the process of making. So architects still use their hands. Like a lot of professions these days don't use their hands like architects do. But in graphic design, we do quite a bit of hands-on work also, so there's a kinship. So here's her short paragraph. Right over here on the shoulder of the page, right under Runway, it says project number 1. So you orient your reader right away. I know what I'm looking at. Anything that comes after this is the project. So again, this type up at the top is called navigation. And we use persistent navigation because it tells somebody what they're looking at all times. Okay, so you notice that everything has a margin and it's consistent. It's called a hang line. The photos don't move up and down, or if they do intentionally. So you know what all this stuff is, and so you can imagine this being something that you did. So in other words, instead of filling up these pages, we've left some negative space here in the middle to allow the eye to look at each project. The page before it, you wanted that to be viewed as one thing, so it bleeds right through. This is called the gutter, the center of the book. And so the decision whether to make it a full bleed like this from side to side is totally dependent on what is being shown. If you'll notice, there's no variation. When it's the margin, but when it bleeds, that's okay. Bleed means the image goes off the page without a white margin or a black margin. So I know that, especially the industrial designers I've had, they're taught to fill a board with everything all at once. And so the biggest shock for them is when they come to my class that you're actually going to use negative space. Just like in a building, you wouldn't fill every single void because then there's no space to matriculate in or circulate. So you can see that different things are used to tell different parts of the story. So in a minute, we should be, it's thinking. So you want to shoot your models so that they can be reproduced. You want to light a model really well when you shoot it. Now, what happened? New chapter, right? You say, oh, now I'm seeing a new project. So again, someone isn't just having to rife through drawings. You're presenting what I call the cherry-picked images from a project. There may be tons of stuff that's not shown, which you always have in the background. If someone says, oh, I'd like to see more of your studies on this project, you say, oh, sure, I have those on my computer. So now Nilo is using what I call God's light box and doing some tracings. And then we begin to see what the project is. Sketches, very important. I can't go too fast. So some things are vector drawings, some things are images that are, collaged or picked up, or some of them are 3D renderings. So I'm just going to keep clicking. And now we're on another project. So again, now there's 3 projects that have been organized in such a way that I can quickly leaf through the pages and get a sense of what this person is capable of. You know, and the projects are whatever they are. This is obviously one, I think this was based on the Duchamp nude descending the stairs, I think, if I recall correctly. So it looks very simple, and it is simple once you understand that you're going to operate within a grid. It kind of gives you, you know, are these going to be 2 square halftones stacked upon each other? But notice they're not, you know, floated apart. They're organized. The prime thing, because it's a lot of information, you have to organize it in such a way, again, so it makes it easy for an employer, a potential employer, to see your current and potential value. Because just coming out of school, you have potential, and then you have your present value of what you can do right now. So my students that have completed the course, oh, this is the one based on the Duchamp nude descending the stairs over here. That's what that is. That was this project. So my students that have taken this class have had great success in their interview process, because this alone sets you apart from somebody who's just got something in a plastic book with printouts on sleeves, or, you know, in plastic sleeves. That's not very elegant. And architects love elegance. Is that not true? Okay. An elegant solution is the one that is just the perfect solution, is the absolute right thing to do. So each time we go into a new project, whatever it is, and tell the story. So here, instead of 2 things, there's 3 things stacked. But notice the intervals between them are the same. That just creates order. So repetition creates order, and it also creates harmony and diversity. So it also the size of the book, it happens to be one of Blurb's standard sizes. Now you could do this book in you could do it a number of ways. We used to, in the old days before Blurb, we would do spiral binding, beautiful metal binding with split rings, and do single pages. But it's much easier these days to do it this way. And it's well worth the money, because by the time you bought the book and the sleeves and all of that, you'd spend at least $300-400. But this book right here costs $200, and it's complete. There's no, except for shipping, whatever that is. So notice this model photography is really excellent. These are rough study models, and we know that. We're not expecting perfection, at least the architect isn't, but they're well photographed. The shade and shadow is really strong. I teased Nilu about this room, is how would you stand up, you know? But I guess that was part of the experiment. And then she included a section called her personal work. This is just stuff that she's done on her own. And then acknowledgments. Every, important book has acknowledgments, thanking people for their participation and their help. And I always encourage students to thank their instructors. You didn't get here on your own. You put in the hard work, but you had people cheering you on, classmates and instructors. And all real books have colophons. That tells how the book is made. It tells you the stock it's printed on. It shows that you're a smart architect. Because one student I had said she was hired because she knew how to do this book, and they had her doing one for their firm. The very next day they hired her. So, and on the back cover she put that last photo. She changed it from this one. This was her original one. We looked at it and we went, let's use that one instead. So now we'll switch to her website. Here it is. So her website is responsive, meaning if this were a laptop, these photos would stack up on top of each other. But a responsive website automatically fills the space, okay, whatever that plat is. So I can look at individual projects and see the individual project, or I can go over here and say, I'd like to see her portfolio. And voila, is her portfolio that you just saw. So we'll go back. There we go. So you also need to include a resume. So if I go here, I would see her resume if it chooses to come up. She's still working on this, so yeah. So there's her resume. Notice the type on her resume matches the type inside the book. There is a typographic vocabulary that you use on every piece of information, whether it be a business card or an envelope. So there's her resume. And then we go back. There we go. So each one of these is called does anybody know what that's called when I do that? It's called a rollover. So I roll over a picture of her and I get the project. And I can go into the detail, she can go into the detail that she chooses to. She doesn't have to include everything for the book because this website would go on for days. People want to just get a flavor of what you can do. The website is what maybe will help you get the interview along with a letter and a nice mailing package. I will show you, I don't have Nilu's yet, but Samantha Buckley said that in your profession they like 1 page per project. So we developed a system for her to do a 1-pager on a project. So we'll go and we'll now look at Samantha Buckley's. Okay, so Samantha Buckley she used photographs of buildings and surfaces that she photographed all over the city. So she called her portfolio Just Touch. And this is a photograph she took. There's her end sheets. There's her title page. So her layout is somewhat different. She does not have a small paragraph that explains things. She says it all right here. In other words, her approach was, I'm going to tell you the one thing I want you to know about this project. But again, she has the navigation, which is up here. Here are the, I forgot I can use this like a pointer. These are little captions that tell you the instructor, the class, the name of the project, etc. But for all intents and purposes, this is project 1 called Long Bridge. And here we go. So most architectural books are done on a simple grid in the variations. And I brought a real architectural book about an architect who has now passed away, but I had the opportunity to meet many years ago. His name is Crombie Taylor. And, when in Rome, we do as the Romans. So when you design a book, it shouldn't all be all fancy and have crazy type going on in it. You'll never see that happen in an architectural book. I used to tease Archer because when he first came to my class, he had like 3 or 4 typefaces and bars and boxes, and I said, no. You're an architect. You want to keep it simple and clean and organized. So that's important to remember because the information needs to just be consistent, needs to be managed. Now we're on another project, some study models. So the work is different but kind of the same, right? Because you all studied architecture in the same fashion. Samantha's book was also not as long as Nilu's. I can show you her physical book is probably 1/3 the size of this one. But that's your choice. So you get the idea? Does it make sense? Yes? No? Makes sense? All right. So now I'm going to let you ask me questions because I've told you all I know. questions for me? You have no questions? That's great. That lets me off the hook. Would you like to see, let's look at Samantha's book. What I can show you, you're going to have to get up out of your seats to see it, is Samantha's stationery system, which everyone should have, that accompanies their request for an interview. For instance, when you mail a letter out, you mail it in a nice envelope with lovely stamps on it. I think she chose an architect, or maybe he was just it's Black heritage, so she chose it for the beauty of the stamp. But even the stamp you choose is important, because it should look right. So when I would get a letter, or any employer would get a letter from Samantha, it would have her resume in it. It would have a cover letter, which I don't know if I have, but there's her cover letter, all on her stationery. These are her one sheets that she's created. But notice they're all part of the same system. They all enjoy the same typographic elements. If she sends a thank you letter, it also has the same attributes. And her business card has a picture on the back. She did each one differently with different backgrounds that match her portfolio. There's her type, says contact, her emails, that's all you need to tell people. Your email, they don't need your address. The only time you use an address is when you're mailing something. You need a return address. So equipped with a system, you start to pick the firms that you want to work for, and you say, hey, Mr. Gensler, I want to come work for you. And I'd like to make an appointment to come show you my work. So she did that, and she also had another interview with a residential architect, and she chose the job at Gensler. So that's where Samantha's working today. So here's her book. So just to show you the difference, and it's not good or bad, it's just that she chose to put less elements in her book than Nilu did. And that's just out of choice. The books, the thing I recommend always if you use a blurb book is to use uncoated paper. It's much richer and much more tactile when you touch it. So there you go. It's in a nutshell, as they say. So I'd love to hear some questions. Yes?
Would you recommend any other site besides Issue, or is that your go-to?
Well, just to do that flippy thing,
Yeah.
I don't...
Best, in your opinion?
As far as I know, it's practically free.
Yeah.
So all you do is send them your files, and then you can embed that into your website. I personally don't know of any other website that does that. There may be, but there's no, there's no Yelp rating on it, so to speak. So it's the only one I know of. So the important thing is that this is the one format that I recommend to architects and industrial designers, because most of your work is long. So the horizontal or the landscape format of this book is perfect. It's about, I think it's 9 by 12 or something, I forget. I should know this, but I will tell you in a minute. So it's 11 by probably 9.5 or 10. Okay? So let's see, wait a minute. So it's 11 by, oh no, it's more than that. 11 by, let's say 12.5. So that's the size. It's only the one, you have no choice about the size. You can make a small book, but I don't recommend that for a portrait format book. I don't allow graphic designers to use the horizontal format because it's not as suited to their work as it is to architecture. So, questions? No questions. Yes. Always takes a while. It takes one brave soul. There's no dumb questions, so ask me anything.
And how do we decide the grade for each page? Because there are differences.
Not really. There's one grid. There's one hang line. There's one side margin, one bottom margin. And once you start lining things up, it just sort of falls into place. It's magical. And you have to use your judgment. you know, a lot of times people want to put too many things on one page and go, whoa, I can't look at all that. So you need to create some negative space so that you can enjoy what's being shown. If it's too jam-packed, you can't focus. So once you've established your margins, like if you look at Nilu's book and Samantha's book, their bottom hang line, like this line right here, this is bigger in Samantha's book than it is in, but that's what we decided together. And these margins, if you compared them side by side, they're slightly different, but that's up to you. But margins are important, because if you ran everything off the page, it just starts to look sloppy. But when you are intentional about what you're bleeding, like that, that's intentionally bleeding off all four. This is called a full bleed. And there are some partial bleeds. Like that page is a full bleed, this is not. But there is a grid underneath this, and notice this navigation stays in one place. So every spread I look at, I know I'm looking at Samantha Buckley's portfolio, and I'm looking at the project called I Look Up. And it's a Yerba Buena mixed-use tower. So I'm never in the dark about what I'm looking at. And in your classes, you've made all kinds of little legends on your drawings. You have to wipe those away and start to use just one typeface, because nothing creates a bigger mess than all different typefaces scattered all around, bold, heavy, different fonts, all that sort of thing. So that's very important. I'll give you a handout, which is really just kind of telling you the mission statement of why we do this. One of the things that's important in graphic design is they have a whole bunch of stuff. I'll get to you in 1 second. Let me finish this thought. Is they have a bunch of stuff to show just like you do. And we developed this process about, I would say about 15 years ago. All the graphic design students just have transparencies, and they would show a transparency of a finished piece, which did not really speak to the process or the evolution of the project. If we need more, I have more. So your question, sir? You had a question?
I just wanted to ask, like, you taught that these people have taken your class.
Yeah.
So is this a kind of a lecture, or?
No, it's a 15-week class.
Oh, 15-week class.
It's a
like
full
semester?
3-credit class.
Okay.
It's a full semester.
So we can take it as an elective.
Yes. And at the current time, since there are a limited amount of classes, you have to have your director's recommendation.
Okay. And do you, does it happen summer as well? Summer semester?
Yes, Archer did it in summer, but ask him how hard that was. He said he thought his head was going to fly off his body. So it's a 3-credit class. It lasts 15 weeks. It meets 3 hours a week. And each week you just sludge through the process. You know, first, even the graphic design, to tell you the truth, it's really amazing. The architects have less trouble doing this than the graphic design students, because they know all the possibilities. They have to show off their graphic design skills in putting this book together. Good thing for you guys is no one expects you to be an accomplished graphic designer, but the fact that you can show up with a book like that, they go, this is good. So it's important for you in a different way. It just makes your work shine. There's not a lot of hoopla going on, whereas they have to be a little bit more fancy and clever, and they take weeks to figure out what they're going to do. The architects get right down there to it, and you know, and with my help, we figure out what's going to be best, and you know, adopt a style. They'll try working with type themselves, but you know, architects aren't trained as typographers. Graphic designers are. So I can look at a block of type and say that's not set right, and you go, why? What's wrong with it? And I said, well, because there's rivers in the type. Okay, so I won't go into what rivers are. Yes?
I'm sorry, I have a question. You know, because presentation, I'm not talking about the resume or portfolio. In presentation, do you recommend the layout should be portrait or landscape?
For the resume?
No, for the presentation purposes. Presentation.
Oh, well, it depends on the site or the thing. I mean, if it's a narrow, let's say it's a narrow thing in some beltway, maybe a vertical orientation. That has nothing to. That's not my bailiwick. That's whatever the team decides. We want to show this. Are you talking about the boards?
Right.
Oh, well, it depends on what's on it. I couldn't answer that question, horizontal portrait or landscape portrait, unless I saw the project.
Right.
But you'll see most of the project lend themselves to horizontal format. Aren't most of your boards horizontal? No? Okay, well, if they're vertical, then you just lay, but that's dictated by the project. It's not any right or wrong. Did I answer your question?
Right, yeah.
Like, for example, if you were going to show the Transamerica building and you wanted it to be magnificently tall, you'd want a tall book, right? I would do a tall, skinny book if I were designing for the Transamerica building, which I did when we presented it and when we won the competition. That was how many years ago? Oh my God. 68? Something like that. Somewhere in there. Yeah. So we didn't even have color printers in those days. All the architects used to rub down every letter with the burnisher. And then I came to the firm and I taught them how to order type from the type house, and they just all thought that I walked on water. And then they would just cut it out and plunk it down. So times have really changed. You couldn't have done these books. These books would have cost thousands and thousands of dollars 20 years ago, because the digital printers didn't exist. Those big, we had to run downstairs to the blueprint guy and hold your nose because of the ammonia, or the whatever that chemical is that they use. So, any more questions? I can tell you a little bit about this list of criteria. Some of these might not fit you, but they're what we use to judge graphic design. And I would say you could identify with many of them, like collaboration, resourcefulness. So these are attributes that we tell our students that they should demonstrate when they go to an interview. And for many of you, those are true also. And then right here, this just goes through the steps of why you would do this. Okay? Now, some of you may have had internships that are so successful that you're going to have that job, and you say, why bother? It's always a good idea, even if you have a job, to do a portfolio, because the firm can go out of business, it can burn down, God forbid something terrible happens. You will always be ready to go look for that next job. So the whole reason to do this is to remove the curse of the brand newly graduated student that any entrepreneur or architect is going to be worried about. Oh, can they handle organizing stuff? Will you show somebody your work in this fashion and they go, yeah, I guess they can organize stuff. They could do that for my clients. Yeah, because that's one of the least loved thing to do in an architect's office, is to do this kind of compiling of a project. We used to do this for single projects. We would do this great big book. My boss, William Pereira, who's passed away now, had his own printing company so he could print his own books. So we used to do books for every project. Oh, somebody's calling me. I'm just going to turn this off. I forgot. Sorry. Anyway, so years ago, one couldn't do this. You'd go get a copy made. And I remember the architects used to fret about how they were going to show what they did, and they would, the Xerox machine barely existed. So it was not an easy, what they used to do, I remember, is they'd have those big zippered cases like this, and they'd pull those boards out and say, I did this, I did that, You know, that's a different experience. We find that when you put a book in someone's hand, it becomes an interactive experience. It's not the same as clicking around with a mouse. You actually are holding something real in somebody's hand, and you're absolutely engaging. If you handed me this book and I was thinking about hiring you, I'd be looking at all of this saying, looks very solid, and it's very, without saying, oh, I like the way they set this type. They're just looking at the gestalt of the whole thing, the impression that it makes. So it really kind of takes the curse off the fact that you're just out of school, and gives a level of confidence to the employer. So that's it. Do you want to come up and see these books up close, or have you had enough? Okay, good. Unless you have any questions, I'm done.